All right, everyone, we start off today talking, of course, about the idea of a national sales tax. This is a reform to the tax structure in the United States that's being promoted by some Republicans. Gates, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and others are on board with this. The effective idea is that you've eliminated the old income tax system. So like all the forms and shit you have to file at the end of the year, those become vestigial, by the way. You can then abolish the IRS. There's no purpose to it. I mean, you'll have a small number of people that are tasked with making sure the businesses are actually collecting the national sales tax totals and then submitting that. But private individuals, because there's no longer any sales tax, they wouldn't have to worry about it. I would say this means you would end up with states, of course, still doing their normal tax thing. If anything, the states would probably compensate for it by robbing people more to keep the tax burden similar. It would also, here's the problem with the proposal. I like the idea of getting rid of the IRS. I don't believe in just constraining it. I don't think it needs to exist at all. There are countries that are capable of having effectively no tax oversight of any significant amount. Somehow they do fine. They're able to pay for the things that they need. Our system's overly convoluted. In my own personal opinion, I think that we should focus on abolishing the property tax for first homes. That would be a good start. Eliminating the IRS, or at the very least streamlining it, removing its, overburdensome bureaucratic authority and size would be nice as well. The idea that we need to grow the IRS, no, I think we need to shrink it if it's still there at all. And number three, it would be nice if they got rid of the self-employment penalty, because I was very surprised the first year I made any money, and it wasn't a huge amount. It was like the equivalent of a part-time job, and I still ended up owing quite a bit of money because of that penalty. It's, by the way, if the Democrats out there are worried about people who are poor, why don't you invert the self-employment penalty and abolish it for the first 100K instead of phasing it out after 100K when the amount paces the income tax? It's literally a regressive tax. I don't see any Democrats talking about that. Here's the problem with the GOP's proposal. Well, first, it's DOA. The Senate is clearly not going to vote in favor of a national sales tax. They like the current system. They don't want a consumption tax because they like materialism. Then that's really the other problem. What you would be doing is disincentivizing people to buy things. Now, a little less materialism is perfectly fine. I promote that myself. You don't need the cheap Chinese plastic shit. You don't really need half the stuff that you own. Like even here in this house, I like to keep things tidy and constrain the things that I buy. Well, I've got a few things that I collect. Otherwise, the things I have tend to be very pragmatic. I have clothes, for example. Yes, by the way, I do have more than one shirt. A computer by which I do my work, etc., etc. And plants, but plants are good for you and they don't count. Plants are fine. Go ahead and splurge. You're disincentivizing people, though, to buy things. You've eliminated a huge tax on much of the population. Middle class is fine. Everyone above the middle class is fine. The problem is you've just massively inflated the price of all goods and services because of the national sales tax, resulting in people who are at the bottom, who weren't paying income tax anyway, all of a sudden paying a consumption tax. You are effectively making the poor poorer by doing this. You could throw a subsidy their way. That's perfectly fine to offset things. You could exempt them or something. You're still going to end up with a sliding scale sort of situation, though. You're going to end up with a sliding scale in which the poor get fucked. If a person is not producing enough and making enough income to justify taxing them at all in the first place, the only thing you can really do is rob other people to give them money and even the playing field commie style, leave them alone, and they'll be poor. There will always be poor people in society. Or you can do this. You can punch them in the face when they're already down. It would not actually work pragmatically. The problem is that a large lump of the population has been impoverished recently anyway by the Biden-inflation that's there. You'd be adding insult to injury by passing a national sales tax. And they're talking about 30%, by the way. Why does it need to be that high if you're even going to have it? Look at the states, by the way, that have those taxes in place. Vermont, for example, has a steep sales tax. A shit ton of people go over the border to New Hampshire to shop. What you may end up seeing, and this would be hilarious, and you already see it to some extent. Right now, some people in Mexico take day trips to the United States to go to the mall. you would end up with a situation where everyone within a reasonable view of the border probably would be going to Mexico for shopping purposes. You'd end up losing huge amounts of money. You know how much people down there in the Rio Grande Valley love Walmart and shopping malls and shit like that? It's basically a remnant of the 90s down there, and that's millions of people who would be going, by the way, to Mexico. They'd be going to Monterey for day trips or something. People would not be able to buy their necessities that they need in some cases. Again, if you're already poor, this is increasing the price of everything that you need to buy, and you already weren't paying an income tax. It's effectively a regressive tax system when you think about it. Again, I've got a much better proposal. Reduce all of the brackets. We did this before under Trump for the income tax. Yeah, it shouldn't exist at all, but if it's going to exist and there's nothing to displace it with that's not going to fuck the 100 million people in the ass, lower the brackets, get rid of the self-employment penalty, get rid of a bunch of bureaus, by the way, to pay for this. You don't need the IRS. You can streamline the tax code. Just sundown all of the loopholes and shit and have a very straightforward system in which everyone is paying far less. The business tax code could be subjected to the same rigorous reform as well. And by the way, abolish again the property tax for first homes to allow people to actually homestead. They're not renting their home from the government effectively, which is slavery, in my opinion. It shouldn't be allowed, even if the states shouldn't be able to impose it either. A lot of times they're tied to funding schools. Isn't there a better way that you can do that? Why don't the states handle the sales tax side of things? The federal government just needs to get the fuck out of the way. And there also needs to be a national cap on how much tax a person can be compelled to pay. There should be a cap on states' ability to tax, the federal government, and the combined total between the two. And it shouldn't be approaching 50%, which, by the way, for people that are not actually rich, they get up towards that level if they live in a high-tax state already. By the way, one tax relief that Biden does support, restoring limitless SALT deductions for the super rich in those states. Just saying. That's about all. Peace out.